Bonnie White won the mayor's seat in May 2016 by 187 votes. Her campaign centered around transparency and open government. Following her election, she was quoted in every local newspaper as being adamantly in favor of transparency in government. "My platform of transparency and citizen involvement resonated," said White. "I heard many times from voters that they're tired of the good old boy system. There's just a lack of transparency at City Hall," she said. White noted transparency of city business as positive steps taken by the City Council. "We heard from the voters that it resonates when we talk about citizen involvement and being transparent with the taxpayers." But in the most recent City Council meeting held on September 26, a budget amendment was introduced that appeared to be anything but transparent. Here's the discussion as that topic was raised during the meeting.
Item number 5A is ordinance number 2017-17, adopting the annual budget for the city of Kerrville, Texas. We had some material at our chairs when we arrived this evening. We did have some information at our dais. Is there any comment that you wanted to make? I believe you brought it to us, Mr. Broody.
Yes, it was basically, and I'm sorry for the late put down of the papers, but I felt like I was still going to make the discussion, and I just felt like the paper was going to be more helpful to the discussion.
It may have been hard to hear exactly what they were talking about. Mr. Broody wished to introduce budget amendments, but his presentation was created too late to distribute it through the proper channels, which would have been to go through the city clerk so that copies can be made and records preserved for the public. But this amendment and presentation was apparently completed too late for that and was dropped as a pamphlet on the council members' chairs when they arrived to the meeting. Mr. Broody went ahead and presented his amendment without objection.
Amendments in addition to the housekeeping amendments that Mr. McDaniel has presented, it's further amendments that would allow us to get to the effective tax rate. So if I could I present that?
Is there any objection from council? I think it would help us and maybe the audience to understand what you're talking about.
Right.
We have it in front of us, but they don't. So.
Right.
However, if the amendment was created by Broody too late for proper distribution, how is it that Mayor White is able to incorporate elements of Broody's amendments in her prepared written statements that she reads a few minutes later? With White's statement, it became clear that she knew exactly what was in those amendments before they were presented and explained in an open meeting.
These few amendments that he mentioned today, in addition to what Mr. McDaniel offered, will have no effect on any of the things that he mentioned tonight. I guess I was the only one that didn't have comments last time since I was absent, so I'll just make mine and then we'll move ahead to the vote because all of you have probably things you'd rather do later. I do want to make one comment that the sales tax increase was actually higher under Mr. McDaniel's projection than under Mr. Broody's. So in particular, this proposed budget provides sufficient funding for patrol vehicles, pickup trucks, a dump truck, an ambulance, and a fire truck.
As you can see, Mrs. White had a number of specific comments relating to those specific budget amendments that Broody offered.
That having been said, I will ask Ms. Breck for a roll call vote. I need a motion.
Mayor, I'd like to move that we accept the proposed budget with the amendments that I outlined here.
Mayor White,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Broody,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogel,
Yes.
Councilmember Summerlin,
No.
Councilmember Ferguson.
No.
Ordinance number 2017-17 as proposed passes.
This budget amendment passed along what's come to resemble party lines. The White Party voting for the budget with the amendments offered by Broody, while Summerlin and Ferguson voted against it and aired their grievances about the content of these budget amendments that disregarded the recommendations from staff. So our question is this: if Broody made these amendments on his own between the last meeting and this meeting, how does White know the details in advance? Mrs. White missed the first budget ordinance hearing and had been unable to attend public meetings until today due to health reasons, as she stated. No public meetings about the budget were posted between the September 12th meeting and the meeting on September 26th. Did Baruti and White work on these amendments together outside of a public meeting? And is that consistent with White's platform of transparency? Further, Councilman Vogel seemed to be content to vote yes on these amendments without offering a single comment, suggestion, or question. Was he already familiar with the amendments that Baruti drafted? Mrs. Summerlin and Mr. Ferguson both had numerous questions and clarifications that were needed to understand what exactly Mr. Baruti was proposing, but Mr. Vogel was silent throughout the entire discussion. If Vogel, Baruti, and White were all in agreement about these amendments ahead of time, does that imply a walking quorum? What does transparency mean to voters? It may mean different things to different people, but the state of Texas has attempted to codify what it feels are the minimum standards for transparency, openness, and accountability via the Texas Open Meetings Act.
Hello, I'm Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott. Thomas Jefferson once said that a public office is a public trust.
The spirit of that law ensures that all government business is done in public, not behind closed doors or in secret good old boy smoky rooms that Mrs. White mentioned. Among other things, the Act helps put governmental deliberation and decision-making in front of the public. Some of the rules are basic, such as requiring a quorum to take action and posting meeting agendas in advance. But there are some more technical aspects of the Act, one of which is called a walking quorum.
Yes? So what if another member comes up and starts talking about a matter of public business?
Well, you should probably politely direct the other member to hold their comments for a future open meeting. If you continue the conversation, you run the risk of a walking quorum problem by knowingly discussing public business outside of a public meeting.
Oddly enough, the term walking quorum, the legal term at least, was coined in a case that dealt with the city's mayor during the budget process. The case was Esperanza Peace and Justice Center versus City of San Antonio, and the decision came down in 2001. The night before an open city council meeting was to be held, the mayor met with several city council members in the city manager's office and spoke with others by telephone about the city budget. A decision was made that night and ratified at the public meeting the next day. The federal court stated that it would violate the spirit of the act and render a result not intended by the legislature if a governmental body may circumvent the act's requirements by walking quorums or serial meetings of less than a quorum, and then ratify at a public meeting the votes already taken in private. The evidence showed that the City Council intended to violate the act. The situation described in Esperanza sounds familiar. And of course the act doesn't only apply to face-to-face or telephone meetings. Simply circulating documents pertaining to city business via email or other methods may also constitute a violation of the act.
A meeting subject to the Open Meetings Act doesn't just apply to traditional meeting settings. It can also occur through a non-spoken exchange, such as written materials or email. The Office of the Attorney General has determined, for example, that circulating an invoice among members of a commissioner's court until a quorum agrees to approve a payment by signing the invoice instead of considering that invoice at a public meeting violates the act.
We do not have enough evidence or information to conclude that the Open Meetings Act was violated in letter or in spirit in this case, but we can be certain that whatever happened, it was not open and transparent as these candidates, and now council members and mayor, promised to be.